Money is a terrible master, but an excellent servant. Phineas Taylor Barnum. That phrase contains a brutal truth that almost no one understands. Most people spend their entire lives enslaved by money, chasing after it, begging for a little more, struggling to survive, without realizing that money was never the problem. The real problem is how we look at it, how we understand it, and above all, the mindset with which we deal with it. I want to welcome you to this journey, which isn't about numbers or magic formulas to become a millionaire, but about something much deeper, your relationship with money. And before you try to think this is just another motivational speech, I want you to stop for a second and think. Why, if we all know we need money to live, are there so many intelligent, hardworking, and dedicated people who still die in poverty? The answer isn't a lack of effort. We all know someone who works more than 12 hours a day and still can't get ahead. Nor is it a lack of talent. There are thousands of people with extraordinary abilities who never achieve financial freedom. The answer, however painful it may be, lies in mindset. Mindset is everything. Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, a study in the United States analyzed a group of lottery winners. Ordinary people, from the lower middle class, who overnight received millions of dollars. Most of them thought their problems were over. The result? In less than 5 years, almost 70% were broke again, with more debt than they had before winning. Some even ended up worse off, divorced, sick, depressed. Why did that happen? Because even though their pockets were overflowing with money, their minds remained impoverished. On the other hand, there are stories of people who started from scratch, without inheritances, without connections, without privileges, and who built lasting fortunes. People who learned to see money as a tool, not an end in itself. Who understood that true wealth isn't measured by what you have in the bank, but by the freedom you achieve through how you use that money. Here's the crucial difference. Knowledge alone doesn't change lives. What changes lives is the mindset with which you apply that knowledge. Think of it this way. Millions of people know that saving is important. Millions know they should spend less than they earn. Millions have heard that investing is key. And yet, very few actually do it. Why? Because their mindset prevents them from taking action. They believe it's not for them, that investing is for the wealthy, that saving is impossible, that managing money is boring. And these beliefs are like invisible chains that bind them to poverty. Conversely, when you change your way of thinking, you change your decisions. And when you change your decisions, you change your destiny. It's that simple, but not easy. Imagine two people, Juan and Pedro. They both earn the exact same amount, $1,000 a month. Juan, as soon as he receives his salary, rushes to pay off debts, buys a new cell phone on installments, spends money on clothes he doesn't need, and ends the month penniless. For him, money is something that disappears, a scarce resource that's never enough. Pedro, on the other hand, with the same salary, decides to set aside 10% as soon as he gets paid. Over time, he starts saving, then invests small amounts in a business, and later buys an asset that generates income. In 5 years, although they both started the same way, Pedro has a financial cushion, while Juan remains trapped in the same cycle. What made the difference? Mindset. This audiobook is designed to open your eyes. And I want you to understand something from the start. No one is going to save you financially. Not the government, not your boss, not the economy. Only you can do it. But to achieve that, the first thing you must change isn't your job, your salary, or your country. It's your mindset. The truth they never told you about money is that it's not a mathematical problem, but a psychological one. It doesn't matter if you know how to add, subtract, or calculate percentages. If you don't change the way you see money, you'll always be in the same place. Think about this. There's more information available in the world than ever before. You have access to books, courses, videos, conferences. Everything you need to know about building wealth is just a few clicks away. So why are so many people broke? Because information isn't transformation. Knowledge stored in your head doesn't change anything until your mindset turns it into action. And this is where your real journey begins. Over the next few hours, we'll delve into topics you may never have been taught. Why society has led you to believe that money is bad, how to identify the invisible fears that hold you back, why poverty isn't just a lack of money but a state of mind, and how to start transforming your relationship with finances from the inside out. I want you to remember something very important. It doesn't matter where you come from, how many financial mistakes you've made, or how old you are. You can always turn things around. There are people who started educating themselves financially in their 50s and in less than a decade achieved what they never imagined. Money is not prejudiced. It doesn't discriminate. It simply responds to how you manage it and how you understand it. Therefore, listen carefully to every word, but above all, reflect on your own life. Ask yourself, what beliefs are limiting me? What ideas about money did I inherit from my family, my school, my culture? How many times have I rejected opportunities out of fear? The answers you give yourself to those questions can be the beginning of your transformation. Because the great truth they never told you is that wealth begins in the mind long before it reaches your wallet. But before we continue, please write in the comments which country you're listening to this audiobook from, and if this message resonates with you, please like and share this post. This way, you'll ensure you don't miss any content that nourishes your mind and brings you closer each day to the life you truly deserve. There's no time to lose. Now, let's continue. Chapter 1. The Myth of Money and the Great Social Lie. From childhood, we've been told the same thing over and over. Money is bad, money is dirty, money corrupts. Perhaps you heard it from your parents, a teacher at school, or a priest at church. Money doesn't buy happiness, they said. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God, they repeated. And little by little, those phrases, though they seemed innocent, became ingrained in our minds. Without realizing it, we grew up with the feeling that aspiring to wealth was wrong, shameful, even sinful. But let me ask you a question. If money is so bad, why does everyone pursue it? If money is corrupting, why do the same people who criticize it work day after day to obtain it? The contradiction is obvious, but we rarely stop to consider it. Because more than a contradiction, what truly exists is a myth, a social lie carefully constructed over centuries. This myth surrounding money has deep roots in culture, religion, and history. During the Middle Ages, for example, the Catholic Church taught that poverty was a path to holiness. Monks took vows of poverty, renounced material possessions, and were admired by the people. In contrast, merchants, those who accumulated wealth, were viewed with suspicion, almost as sinners. This narrative didn't arise randomly. It was a way to maintain social control. If ordinary people believed that money was evil, then they didn't aspire to have it and accepted their living conditions without resistance. We find this view in many Eastern cultures as well. In some schools of Buddhism, complete detachment from material things is considered the path to enlightenment. And while there is profound spiritual value in the idea of not depending on money for inner peace, the message has been distorted to the extreme, becoming a disdain for money itself. The curious thing is that even in those cultures, temples and religious institutions depended on donations from their followers. Money that came from the economic activity of the very people who were being taught not to desire it. This isn't about criticizing religions or traditions. It's about understanding how these ideas, repeated generation after generation, shaped our relationship with money. If you tell a child from a young age that money is dirty, how can you expect them to respect, manage, and grow it as an adult? They'll grow up feeling guilty every time they earn a little more, fearful every time they think about investing, and ashamed if they ever dream of being rich. And that invisible guilt becomes a chain that binds them to mediocrity. Let's think about something closer to home. Perhaps you've heard phrases like, the rich got rich by exploiting others. If you have money, it's because you took it from someone. The poor are poor because they're good, and the rich because they're bad. These phrases seem harmless, but they carry a silent poison. They portray wealth as something dirty, immoral, and unjust. And at the same time, they glorify poverty as if it were a virtue. But reality isn't so simple. There are corrupt rich people, yes. But there are also corrupt poor people. There are generous rich people who create jobs, donate millions, and transform entire communities. And there are poor people who, out of envy or resentment, destroy what little they have around them. Money doesn't change people's hearts. It simply amplifies them. If you are generous without money, you will be much more so with it. If you are selfish and mean in poverty, money will only give you more power to demonstrate it. The myth of money doesn't just affect individuals, but entire societies. Think about countries where entrepreneurs are culturally punished, where businesspeople are demonized, where those who want to get ahead are ridiculed. What happens in those nations? They stagnate. People don't innovate, they don't take risks, they don't invest. And subsequent generations inherit that stagnation. In contrast, countries that value effort, merit, and wealth creation progress faster. Not because they have more natural resources, but because they have less prejudice against money. I'm going to tell you a true story. At a conference in Latin America, a young student asked a millionaire businessman, "What does it feel like to be rich while so many people are poor?" The businessman looked at him calmly and replied, "It feels like a responsibility. Because if I had stayed poor, today I wouldn't have a company that employs 500 families. And those 500 families would probably be worse off. The problem isn't that I'm rich. The problem is that there are still too many people who believe that being poor is a virtue." That answer deeply affected me. When we accept the myth that money is dirty, we relinquish our power. It's as if we're holding back our financial lives. We work, we study, we strive. But deep down we feel we don't deserve to prosper. And when we believe we don't deserve it, we unconsciously reject the opportunities that come our way. Imagine a woman who gets the chance to start a small business. She's afraid. It's not fear of hard work, because she's always worked hard. It's fear of what people will say if she succeeds. What will her neighbors think if she suddenly starts earning more money? Will they criticize her? Will they call her selfish? This fear, rooted in cultural beliefs about money, holds her back. And so, a real opportunity is lost. From generation to generation, these fears and prejudices are passed down like an invisible legacy. Parents who say, "It's best not to dream of being rich, because rich people are bad," don't realize they are programming their children to live with a glass ceiling. The children grow up, become adults, and without knowing why, they feel there is something wrong with aspiring to more. And the cycle repeats itself, again and again. The biggest societal lie isn't that money is dirty, but making you believe you don't have the right to prosper. That your role in life is to conform, to survive, to be grateful for scraps. But when someone breaks that chain and decides to think differently, they don't just change their own destiny. They change the destiny of their entire family. So I want to leave you with a powerful thought. Money is neither moral nor immoral. It's neither clean nor dirty. It's a tool. And like any tool, it depends on who uses it. In the hands of a thief, a knife is a weapon. In the hands of a chef, it's art. In the hands of a doctor, it's life. Money is the same. In the wrong hands it can cause harm, but in the right hands it can build schools, hospitals, businesses, jobs, and progress. Freeing yourself from society's lies about money is the first step toward respecting it and using it wisely. And remember, whoever tells you money is bad is probably struggling to get it just as much as you are. The difference is that, while they live with guilt, you can learn to see it for what it truly is. An instrument of freedom. Chapter 2. The poor mindset versus the rich mindset. Two people can earn the same salary, live in the same neighborhood, attend the same school, and even work at the same company. But over the years one achieves financial independence while the other becomes trapped in debt. The difference lies not in their environment or opportunities, but in something much deeper, mindset. That invisible way we interpret money, how we use it, and how we make decisions about it. The poverty mindset views money as an end in itself. It dreams of having it, idolizes it, and pursues it like an unattainable trophy. It sees it as a goal that, when reached, will magically solve all problems. The poor person thinks, "If I had more money, I would be happy. If I got a raise, my life would change. If I won the lottery, everything would be solved." It's a dependency-based approach, where money is the savior that never arrives. The wealthy mindset, on the other hand, doesn't see money as an end in itself, but as a means to an end. It neither idolizes nor despises it, it respects it. It uses money as a tool to create more tools, to build projects, to multiply value. For the wealthy, money isn't the goal, but the resource that allows them to achieve greater goals. And that difference in perception changes everything. Imagine this scenario. A poor man receives an extra $100 at the end of the month. He automatically thinks about spending it. maybe on dinner, clothes he likes, a new cell phone on installments. He feels he deserves it for all his hard work. The wealthy man, faced with the same situation, thinks differently. How can I make this $100 work for me? Where can I invest it so it grows? Perhaps he invests it in a small business, perhaps he puts it in an investment fund, perhaps he uses it to buy books that teach him how to earn more. It's not the amount that matters, it's the mindset. A real-life example can be found in the story of Chris Gardner, the man whose life inspired the film The Pursuit of Happiness. Chris lived in poverty, homeless, with a young son to care for. He had every reason to give up, but what saved him was his mindset. While many in his situation thought only about surviving the next day, he thought about learning, growing, and entering the world of investing. That vision took him from sleeping in public restrooms to becoming a successful stockbroker and entrepreneur. It wasn't luck, it wasn't a stroke of fortune, it was a change in mindset. When people say, the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, it's not just about social injustice. To a large extent, it's about mindset. The poor, when they receive more, spend it. The rich, when they receive more, invest it. And that small difference, repeated over years, creates a chasm. Money as an idol is another trap of the poverty mindset. When someone idolizes money, it becomes their obsession. They measure everything by how much they earn or spend. They live with the illusion that one day they will have enough to feel complete, and without realizing it, they become a slave to money. And the irony is that, by idolizing it, they lose it. Because they end up spending on things they don't need, just to show off, just to put on a show. That's the mindset that buys luxury cars on credit, that changes phones every 6 months, that lives to show off instead of living to build. The wealthy mindset, in contrast, understands that money is not a god, but a servant. A good servant, but a terrible master. The wealthy don't seek to show off with luxuries, they seek to multiply value. If they buy an expensive car, it's not to boast, but because their passive income allows it without hindering their growth. The poor say, when I have money, I'll start investing. The wealthy say, I'll start investing, and then I'll have money. Let's look at another example. Imagine two young university students who get their first jobs and earn the same salary. The first spends his salary on going out, gadgets, and designer clothes. The second saves a percentage, buys books on finance, and seeks mentorship. 10 years pass. The first is still dependent on his salary, perhaps now with debt. The second, with the same starting point, has built an investment portfolio, learned to generate extra income, and probably has more freedom to choose what to do with his time. The starting point was identical. The difference lay in their mindsets. A common misconception is that a wealthy mindset only emerges once you already have money. It's the other way around. Money comes when you first adopt that mindset. Think about it. If you don't know how to manage $100, you won't know how to manage $10,000 either. If you don't know how to invest $50, you won't know how to invest $5,000 either. The scale changes, but the mindset remains the same. That's why so many lottery winners end up broke, because they received wealth with a poverty mindset. And it's not just about spending or investing. It's about how you interpret life. A poverty mindset says, I can't afford it. A wealth mindset says, how can I afford it? One word changes everything. The poor see obstacles. The rich see challenges. The poor believe everything is against them. The rich look for opportunities. And in the real world, those who seek opportunities always find them. I want to tell you the story of a friend who started out selling candy on the street. While others looked at him with pity, he saw it as an opportunity to learn how to negotiate. Every day he earned a little, and instead of spending it all, he reinvested it in more products. Over time, he opened a small stall, then a shop, then a distribution company. Today, years later, he has several branches. What changed? It wasn't his luck. It wasn't a twist of fate. It was his mindset of seeing money as a seed, not a prize. The most curious thing is that a poor mindset and a rich mindset don't depend on how much money you have. I've seen people with high salaries who spend everything on luxuries and live in debt, acting with a poor mindset. And I've seen humble people with modest incomes who save, invest, and build little by little, acting with a rich mindset. True wealth begins long before money. It begins in the mind. Ultimately, the essential difference is this. The poor believe money has power over their lives. The rich know they have power over money. The poor live reacting. The rich live deciding. And that's what separates those who spend their lives chasing money from those who make money work for them. If you find yourself thinking today that everything would change if you had more money, I invite you to take a step back and ask yourself, how am I thinking about money right now? Do I see it as an idol that will save me, or as a tool I can learn to use? Because if you change how you see it, you'll change how you act. And if you change how you act, you'll inevitably change your results. Chapter 3. The Real Enemy, the Fear of Money. The greatest enemy of wealth is not a lack of opportunity, the economic system, or even social injustice. The greatest enemy is invisible and resides in the mind of every person, the fear of money. This fear takes many forms, all of them destructive. Fear of losing it, fear of investing, fear of not having it. It is the fear that paralyzes, that condemns generations to repeat the same cycle of scarcity, and that prevents millions from taking a single step toward their financial freedom. The fear of losing money manifests itself very clearly. Those who experience it live with the obsession of hoarding it, of not letting go, of keeping it stagnant. They can spend years saving in secret, hiding bills under the mattress, but never making any progress. Because that fear leads them to protect what little they have, instead of risking multiplying it. The irony is that what they fear happens. That saved money loses value with inflation, erodes over time, and eventually disappears. What seemed like security becomes a loss. Then there's the fear of investing. This is perhaps the most common fear. People dream of financial freedom, but deep down they're paralyzed by stories of failure. What if I invest and lose everything? What if I get scammed? What if I don't know enough? Legitimate questions, but they mask a deeper truth. The fear isn't of failure, it's of the discomfort of learning. Because investing requires knowledge, it requires discipline, it requires taking responsibility. And most people prefer to stay in the comfort of not trying anything. Finally, there's the fear of not having money. It's a fear that shackles the entire lives of millions of people. From a young age, they're taught to choose safe careers, stable jobs, guaranteed paths. They aren't told to dare to create, to start businesses, to innovate. They're told, make sure you don't lose your job, make sure you have a fixed salary, even if it's not enough, even if you don't like it. And so, this fear of not having money ends up being a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because out of fear of scarcity, they always accept scarcity as a way of life. Fear has a devastating power. It paralyzes. It prevents progress. Imagine someone standing before a door that leads to new opportunities, but it's locked. They have the key in their pocket, but they don't use it, because they fear the door leads to an unknown place. That's how many people live with money. They know the key lies in learning, in investing, in taking action, but they don't act because fear whispers that it's better to stay put. That whisper is comfortable, but it's deadly. A clear example is that of those who never start a business because they're afraid of failing. They remain stuck with the idea, the dream, the plans on paper. A year passes, 5 years pass, 10 years pass, and all that's left is the frustration of not having tried. And the curious thing is that, in the end, the failure wasn't the business that never existed, but the life that was never lived. Fear of money is inherited, just like a poverty mindset. A parent who tells their child things like, don't spend, everything runs out, don't invest, you'll get scammed, stick to what's safe, is sowing seeds of paralysis in the mind of the next generation. That child will grow up with a limited vision, with distrust, with the idea that money is dangerous. And in adulthood, they will repeat the exact same patterns. Thus, entire families spend decades trapped in the same poverty, not for lack of talent, but for excessive fear. But what happens when someone breaks the cycle? When they decide to face their fear instead of obeying it? This is where the most powerful strategy emerges, replacing fear with action. Because fear never truly disappears. There will always be risk, always doubt, always uncertainty. What changes is your response. The poor person feels fear and stops. The rich person feels fear and acts anyway. The difference is that the rich person understands that fear is not a sign to stop, but a sign that they are stepping outside their comfort zone. How do you transform fear into action? First, with information. Fear is born of ignorance. You fear what you don't know. You fear what you don't understand. When you learn how an investment works, when you study how to build a business, when you learn about the success stories of those who have achieved it, fear begins to lose its power. It's no longer an invisible monster. It's a challenge you know how to face. Second, with practice. You can't expect to conquer fear overnight, but you can start with small steps. Invest a minimal amount. Start a side business without quitting your job. Test an idea on a small scale. Every action, no matter how small, diminishes the fear. And with each victory, confidence grows. Third, mindset matters. The wealthy don't see losses as failures, but as learning experiences. The poor are terrified of losing $100 and never even try. The wealthy know that losing $100 on an investment teaches them a lesson worth far more than the money lost, because that lesson prepares them to earn thousands more in the future. Mindset changes the meaning of fear. It's no longer an enemy, it's now a teacher. Think of it this way. Fear doesn't disappear when you take the first step. It disappears after you've taken many steps and realized that nothing serious happens. Like when you learn to ride a bike. At first, the fear of falling was intense. But when you tried again and again, when you fell and got back up, suddenly the fear disappeared. Not because the bike changed, but because you changed. The same thing happens with money. If you want to transform your financial life, you must be willing to live with fear, to feel it and still act. Each time you do, you'll discover that the fear was bigger in your head than in reality. You'll discover that many of the tragedies you imagined never happened. You'll discover that what seemed impossible was just an uncomfortable step you had to take. I want to leave you with a powerful thought. What would you do if you weren't afraid of money? What business would you start? What investment would you try? What decision would you make right now? Write down your answer and look at it. That's the life that fear is stealing from you right now. And the only way to get it back is by facing that fear with action. Remember, the enemy isn't money. The enemy isn't risk. The real enemy is fear. If you manage to conquer it, you will have won the most important battle on your path to wealth. Because everything else, investing, business, financial freedom, is only possible when you take the first step despite the fear. Chapter 4. Respect for money. The key that separates rich and poor. If there's an invisible line dividing the world of the rich from the world of the poor, it's not a line of inheritance, luck, or even formal education. It's a line of respect. Because, strange as it may sound, what truly makes the difference is how each person respects money. Respect is not idolatry. Respect is recognizing its value, understanding its power, and handling it consciously. And on this point, the difference is stark. While the poor tend to despise it, squander it, or see it as an inconvenient enemy, the rich respect it as one respects an ally accompanying them on the path to freedom. What does it truly mean to respect money? It means not seeing it as something fleeting, but as a tool for building something. It means that every bill, no matter how small it may seem, has a purpose. Respecting money means not letting it slip through your fingers aimlessly, not allowing impulse or emotion to dictate your decisions. A person who respects their money is like an architect with blueprints. They know where every brick, every foundation, is going. In contrast, someone who doesn't respect it builds on sand, without direction, and ends up watching everything crumble time and time again. Respect begins in the everyday. A poor person might say, "It's just $1, it doesn't matter what I spend it on," but that small act of disdain, repeated 1,000 times, becomes a great drain. The rich person, on the other hand, sees in that same dollar a seed that can grow. It's not about obsessing over every penny, but about understanding that everything adds up. Accumulation is the foundation of wealth, and those who respect their money take care of every detail because they know that greatness is built on small things. Habits are the clearest reflection of that respect. The first of these is saving. But not the kind of saving driven by fear, the kind that involves keeping money under the mattress, untouched. Respectful saving is intentional. It has a purpose. It's about setting aside a portion of what you earn not because it's left over, but because it's a priority. A person who respects money never spends first and saves what's left, because they know that what's left is usually nothing. They pay themselves first, they set aside a percentage for the future, and then they allocate the rest. This simple habit makes all the difference between those who are always in debt and those who always have some breathing room. The second habit is investing. Here, the level of respect is even more evident. The poor person believes that spending is the only function of money. The wealthy person understands that investing is true respect because it gives money the potential to multiply. It's not just about putting money into the stock market or businesses, but about the mindset of sowing seeds. When a farmer respects their seed, they don't throw it on the ground haphazardly, they don't waste it. They place it in the right soil, they nurture it, they water it. The wealthy person does the same with their money. They don't throw it around randomly, but rather they look for where it can grow. This habit is the difference between watching money disappear and seeing it work for you even while you sleep. The third habit is control. Respecting money means understanding it. Knowing how much comes in, how much goes out, and where it goes. Most people have no idea where their money goes. They earn a salary, spend it immediately, pay off debts, and at the end of the month they feel like it's not enough. But they never sit down to look at it in detail. The wealthy do. They control every flow, not out of greed, but out of clarity. They make budgets, review accounts, and analyze expenses. And because they have control, they can make smart decisions. The poor, without control, are carried away by the current, and that current always drags them toward scarcity. Real stories show us how this respect changes destinies. Think of someone who lived in debt for years because every time they received money, they spent it on immediate luxuries. Clothes, parties, whims. For that person, money was a means of momentary pleasure, not a long-term ally. When the crisis hit, they had no fund, no savings, nothing to fall back on. This lack of respect left them vulnerable. In contrast, imagine someone who, with the same modest salary, decided to set aside 10% each month, however small. That discipline led them to build a fund that, over time, became capital for a small business. That business grew, and years later, that person lived freely, not because they earned more initially, but because they respected what they had. There are even more inspiring examples. People who, by learning to respect money, transformed not only their own lives but also the lives of generations. A famous case is that of a young immigrant who started working a humble job, earning barely enough to survive. But instead of spending on luxuries he couldn't afford, he respected every penny. He saved, invested in education, and made conscious decisions. In a decade, he went from surviving day to day to owning several businesses. His respect for money didn't mean worshiping it, but rather using it as a vehicle to achieve his goals. His family, who once lived in scarcity, now lives in abundance, thanks to that decision. This pattern repeats itself time and again. Those who respect money see it grow. Those who despise it see it slip away. And the key lies in how you treat it every day. Because respecting money doesn't depend on how much you have. A millionaire can disrespect it and lose everything in an instant, while someone with a modest income can respect it and turn it into wealth. The difference isn't in the amount, but in the attitude. Respect also means avoiding self-deception. Many people say, when I have more, I'll manage it better. But if you don't respect it when you have little, you'll never respect it when you have a lot. The history of lottery winners proves it. Most, within a few years, find themselves back in the same poverty because they never learned the habit of respect. Having money without knowing how to manage it is like giving a Ferrari to someone who never learned to drive. They'll crash it. That's why every bill that passes through your hands is an opportunity to show respect. It doesn't matter if it's a small amount. What matters is how you treat it. Do you let it slip away on things you won't remember the next day? Or do you direct it toward something that will pay off in the long run? That's the daily test that separates the rich from the poor. Respecting money is, ultimately, respecting yourself. Because your relationship with it reflects your relationship with your future. If you treat it with disdain, it's because you subconsciously despise the life you could build. If you treat it with care, it's because you trust in your ability to create a better tomorrow. Money is a mirror. It shows you how you think, how you decide, how you live. And that reflection is what ultimately shapes your destiny. In conclusion, The key that separates rich and poor isn't the amount of money in their bank accounts, but the respect with which they manage it. To respect is to value it, direct it, grow it, and take care of it. To disregard it is to spend it recklessly, run from it, or mistreat it with debt and neglect. Those who respect money build wealth. Those who don't, lose it. And the most powerful thing of all is that this respect doesn't depend on your current situation. You can start today with what you have and change the course of your life. Because respecting money is the first sign that you're ready for money to respect you in return. Chapter 5. The financial education they never taught you. If you look at most people's educational paths, you'll notice a recurring pattern. They spend over 15 years in school, a few more in university, studying math, literature, history, chemistry, even learning complex formulas they'll never use in real life, yet they venture out into the world without the slightest understanding of how money works. They can solve advanced equations, but they don't know how to budget. They can recite philosophical theories, but they don't understand how to generate passive income. And then comes the shock. They have a degree hanging on the wall, but they have no clarity on how to survive financially without being tied to a salary. The question is unavoidable. Why do schools and universities never teach us about money? The answer has deep roots. The traditional education system was born during the Industrial Revolution, a time when factories needed obedient, punctual employees capable of following instructions. It wasn't designed to create financially independent people, but rather workers who would fit into a machine. Talking about money, teaching how to multiply it, or how to become independent would have been dangerous, because a financially independent worker isn't content with a routine job. Thus, formal education focused on training employees, not entrepreneurs or investors. That legacy persists to this day. Schools that teach memorization, universities that prepare students for the job market, but almost none teach how to manage the most basic tool of adult life, money. The result is obvious. Entire generations grew up believing that the only possible path was to study, get good grades, get a good job, and hope that life would take care of itself. But what they weren't told is that a good job without financial education guarantees nothing. There are doctors, engineers, and lawyers with prestigious degrees who are drowning in debt because they never learned to manage their earnings. Meanwhile, there are people without formal education who understood basic money principles and managed to build fortunes. That is the clearest proof that financial knowledge is more crucial than any diploma. The basic principles of financial education are simple, yet powerful. The first is to spend less than you earn. It seems obvious, but it's the least practiced. Most people spend the same as, or even more than, they earn, and cover the difference with debt. This vicious cycle keeps them trapped for life. In contrast, those who understand this principle always live below their current means, not because they are stingy, but because they know that the difference is what allows them to grow. That margin is the fertile ground where wealth sprouts. The second principle is making money work for you. Most people believe the only way is to work for money, selling their time in exchange for a salary. But the wealthy understand that money can be employed, a silent worker that, if placed in the right position, generates more money. Investing in a business, in property, in financial assets, in any mechanism that generates income without your constant presence, is the key to freeing yourself from the slavery of endless work. The third principle is to differentiate between assets and liabilities. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket. A liability is something that takes it out. Most people confuse these terms. They think their house is an asset, even though it actually requires monthly mortgage payments, taxes, and maintenance. They think the latest model car is an investment, even though it loses value the day it leaves the dealership. The wealthy, on the other hand, look for assets. Properties that generate income, businesses that produce cash flow, investments that pay dividends. This difference in perspective is what builds or destroys fortunes over time. The fourth principle is the power of compound interest. This simple concept, which many barely remember from math class, is considered by some to be the most powerful secret in the financial world. It states that money makes more money, and reinvested earnings generate further earnings, creating a snowball effect. The poor ignore this principle, spending what they have and never allowing their money to multiply. The wealthy apply it with discipline, even starting with small amounts, knowing that time is the true multiplier. These basic principles don't require complicated formulas or university degrees. They require discipline, vision, and respect. But most people never learn them because the education system doesn't consider them important. So, young people go out into the real world and stumble upon reality. Credit cards that trap them, student loans that drown them, a lack of clarity on how to build wealth. It's like throwing someone into the sea without teaching them how to swim. Real-life stories confirm this truth. A young woman, a recent graduate with excellent grades, landed a well-paying job. Soon after, she began spending as if her income were unlimited. Designer clothes, trips, expensive dinners. Without any control, she racked up credit card debt. Within a few years, she was living a stressful life, working only to pay interest. No one ever taught her that spending less than you earn is more important than having a high salary. Conversely, another young man without a college degree decided to open a small food business. He earned little at first, but he understood that he needed to set aside a percentage to reinvest. He bought better equipment, then opened a second location. In 10 years, he built a profitable chain. He never set foot in a university, but he applied basic principles of financial literacy that most graduates ignore. Simple, almost obvious concepts are the difference between poverty and wealth. Controlling expenses, investing in assets, reinvesting profits, and having the patience to let compound interest do its work. None of this is taught in school. And as long as it isn't, the gap will continue to widen between those who discover it for themselves and those who wait for someone else to explain it to them. It's important to recognize that financial illiteracy isn't a personal failing, but a cultural void. No one taught you because no one knew how. Perhaps your parents didn't learn it either. Your teachers lacked the tools. Society as a whole normalized the idea that talking about money was vulgar, that saving was enough, and that debt was inevitable. And so, silence became a legacy of poverty. But breaking this cycle is possible. It all starts with recognizing that the financial education you were never taught is now your responsibility to learn. You don't need to wait for schools to change or for universities to add new subjects. You can start today by applying the basics. Spend less than you earn, invest in assets, reinvest profits, and let time work in your favor. These principles are universal and never fail. The difference lies in who dares to apply them. Most people hear about them and ignore them because they sound too simple. But simplicity is precisely what makes them powerful. Wealth isn't built on hidden secrets, but on discipline applied to the basics. Every person who is wealthy today began by understanding these fundamentals and consistently repeating them. Every person who is poor today ignored or rejected them. That's the truth that's never taught in a classroom, but it defines the financial destiny of millions. Chapter 6. The Cycle of Poverty. How it works and how to break it. The cycle of poverty is not merely an economic concept. It is an invisible chain passed down from generation to generation that extends far beyond a lack of money. It is a system of deeply ingrained beliefs, habits, and fears that limit the lives of millions of people worldwide. It begins in childhood, is nurtured in adolescence, and ultimately shapes an entire adult life. When a child grows up hearing phrases like, money is never enough, rich people are bad, or we weren't born for that, what they are actually receiving are not just words, but psychological commands that penetrate their subconscious and determine their economic destiny. And the most shocking thing is that most people aren't even aware they are living under this conditioning. Imagine a family where the parents argue about bills every month, where they live paycheck to paycheck, where borrowing or going into debt becomes the only way to get by. For the children in that family, this dynamic becomes normal. They grow up learning that money is always scarce, that life is a constant struggle, and that only a lucky few can have abundance. And as adults, without realizing it, they replicate the exact same patterns. They spend more than they earn, they don't save, they're afraid to invest, and they end up trapped in the very cycle they swore to avoid. The cycle of poverty is also collective. It's no coincidence that entire neighborhoods, cities, or even countries share the same mindset toward money. Where people constantly repeat, life is hard, or those with money cheat, a shared culture of limitation is created. It's like a virus transmitted through conversations, attitudes, and invisible beliefs. We see it reflected in entire communities where the highest aspiration is to survive, not to thrive. In these environments, anyone who tries to break the norm and think differently is often criticized, singled out, or even rejected, as if seeking prosperity were an act of betrayal against the group. But what perpetuates this cycle isn't just a lack of money, but but a lack of the mindset to create new opportunities. A person can receive a large sum of money, whether through inheritance, the lottery, or a stroke of luck, and still fall back into poverty within a few years if they don't break the patterns ingrained in their mind. History is full of lottery winners who ended up worse off than before because they didn't know how to manage their newfound wealth. In contrast, those with the right mindset can start from scratch and gradually build sustainable wealth. One of the most destructive beliefs that perpetuates the cycle of poverty is the idea that economic success depends solely on external factors. The government, luck, your boss, the economy. This victim mentality robs people of their personal power because it places the keys to prosperity in the hands of others. The truth is that, while external conditions do play a role, individual mindset and choices carry enormous weight. Two people can live in the same impoverished neighborhood, attend the same substandard school, and yet end up with completely opposite fates. One trapped in scarcity, the other building abundance. The difference lies in what each person chooses to believe and the actions they take to change their reality. Breaking the cycle of poverty requires courage because it means going against what you've learned, against what everyone around you repeats, against the comfort of the familiar. It means challenging your family, your environment, and even yourself. It's like swimming against the current. For example, a young person raised in an environment where no one saves can decide to start saving a small percentage of their earnings, even if it's just a token amount at first. That simple act is already a break in the cycle because they are planting a seed of discipline that didn't exist before in their family. The same is true for the decision to become financially literate. Reading books, listening to audiobooks, surrounding yourself with people who have a different mindset. Every step, however small, opens a crack in the walls of the cycle. It's also crucial to recognize that the cycle of poverty is perpetuated by everyday habits. It's not just about grand beliefs, but about small, repeated actions. Buying unnecessary things to impress others, going into debt to throw parties, prioritizing instant gratification over thinking about the future. All of these behaviors perpetuate scarcity. And the most ironic thing is that these decisions are often justified with phrases like, "Life is short, you have to enjoy it," or, "When I have more money, I'll save it." The truth is, you'll never have more money if you don't learn to manage what little you have. Respect for money begins with the details. Breaking out of this cycle also means changing your environment. If you always surround yourself with like-minded people, your mind remains trapped within the same limitations. That's why one of the most powerful steps is to seek out new role models, mentors, and communities that talk about prosperity and challenge your worldview. It's not about abandoning your loved ones, but about broadening your mental horizons. Exposure to different ideas can awaken the seed of a new future within you. A practical strategy for breaking the cycle is to start with small financial commitments that build confidence. For example, opening a savings account and committing to not touching that money except in genuine emergencies. Or investing in something that generates a return, even a small one, just to prove that money can multiply. Every positive experience reduces fear and reinforces an abundance mindset. The secret lies in accumulating small wins that, over time, become a new financial identity. Another essential aspect is language. The words we use about money program our minds. Someone who repeats, "I'm bankrupt," or "I'm poor, but honest," is constantly reinforcing a reality of scarcity. Changing our language is a powerful tool. Instead of saying, "I can't afford it," say, "How can I get it?" That simple variation opens the door to creative solutions instead of closing it with resignation. Ultimately, breaking the cycle of poverty is an act of responsibility that is not only individual but also generational. When a person decides to educate themselves, save, invest, and change their mindset, they transform not only their own life but also the lives of their children and grandchildren. Each new positive decision creates a legacy that can perpetuate abundance instead of scarcity. Just as poverty is inherited in the form of limiting beliefs, wealth can also be inherited in the form of habits, principles, and mindset. The good news is that this cycle isn't indestructible. It's strong, but not eternal. Millions of people around the world have shown that it's possible to break free from scarcity and build real prosperity. What's needed isn't luck, but awareness, discipline, and determination. The cycle is broken when someone, in the midst of the darkness of scarcity, dares to light a candle and say, "This ends here. A new story begins with me." Chapter 7. Investment versus Consumption. The Everyday Dilemma. The dilemma between investing and consuming is one of the most crucial in anyone's life, though it rarely receives the attention it deserves. Every day, millions of people face this crossroads without being aware of what's truly at stake. For many, spending seems the most natural option, even the only possible one. They buy what they want in the moment, giving in to promotions, social pressure, or the need for instant gratification. For others, however, every spending decision is evaluated from a different perspective. That of investment, growth, sowing seeds that will bear fruit tomorrow. That is the invisible but powerful difference between the poor and the rich. Uncontrolled consumption is a bottomless pit. Someone can earn a decent wage, receive an unexpected bonus, or even win the lottery, and still end up in the same situation of scarcity if it's all spent on satisfying fleeting desires. Buying a bigger TV, a state-of-the-art cell phone, or designer clothes might bring momentary pleasure, but after a few months, those items lose their novelty and become just another part of the daily routine. The money is gone, but it leaves no legacy. In contrast, investment, while sometimes less exciting in the short term, has the capacity to multiply and sustain. When a wealthy person receives extra income, their first question isn't, "What should I buy?" but rather, "How can I make this money generate more?" A simple example illustrates this. Two friends receive the same bonus at work, let's say $1,000. The first decides to use it to buy a new, state-of-the-art television because his is outdated. For a few days, he enjoys the novelty and is proud to show it off to his guests, but soon he no longer feels any difference. It's simply another television in his living room. The second friend, on the other hand, takes that same money and invests it in a fund or a course that allows him to acquire a valuable skill. A year later, while the first friend's television has lost value and is barely remembered as an expensive indulgence, the second has seen his money grow or has received a promotion thanks to the new skill he acquired. The difference in mindset is enormous and, over time, it amplifies exponentially. What the poor often fail to grasp is that rampant consumption not only depletes resources but also creates a cycle of dependency. The more one spends on goods that produce no value, the more one needs to keep working just to maintain a lifestyle that offers no future security. It's a race on a treadmill. You run, you sweat, you expend energy, but you never move forward. The wealthy, on the other hand, use investment as a way to get off that treadmill. With each investment, they create small systems that work for them, generating income even while they sleep. Another key difference is time. Consumers think in terms of the immediate present. I want it now, I need it right now. Investors think in terms of longer horizons. 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. This simple shift in perspective determines the results. Imagine someone who decides to spend $100 every month on unnecessary outings, clothes they don't wear, or gadgets they soon forget. In 10 years, they will have spent $12,000 without even realizing it. On the other hand, if that money had been invested in a moderate portfolio with an average return, it could have grown to more than $20,000. The difference isn't in the initial amount, but in the repeated habit of choosing to invest instead of consume. Social pressure plays a huge role in this dilemma. In many circles, consumption is seen as a status symbol. Owning the newest car, designer clothes, or taking the most exotic vacations becomes a way to gain validation from others. The irony is that many of these outward displays of wealth don't come from truly rich people, but from those trapped in a mindset of appearances. The truly wealthy don't need to constantly prove what they have. On the contrary, they tend to be more discreet and strategic with their spending. They prefer to spend on assets that no one sees, such as stocks, real estate, or businesses, rather than on conspicuous luxuries that only serve to impress momentarily. A very clear example can be found in the automotive world. A consumer-minded person might go into debt for years to buy a luxury car that loses value the moment it leaves the dealership. An investor-minded person, on the other hand, might use that same money as capital for a transportation business or to buy a more economical car that generates additional income. The long-term result is completely different. One is left with debt and a depreciating asset, while the other builds a sustainable income stream. This doesn't mean investing means eternally depriving yourself of enjoyment. On the contrary, investing is the safest way to guarantee free and sustainable consumption in the future. The difference is that wealthy people know that you sow first and then you reap. They do enjoy life, yes, but they do so from the abundance their investments generate, not from sacrificing their stability. That's why they can travel, indulge in luxuries, and live comfortably. because they have built assets that pay for those luxuries, instead of sacrificing their future to satisfy a momentary desire. A common mistake among those with a consumer mindset is believing that investing requires large sums of money. The reality is that you can start with small, but consistent amounts. The essential thing is the habit, not the initial amount. Investing $10 or $20 a month may seem insignificant, but over time it builds discipline and generates compound interest. Conversely, those who wait to have enough money to start investing almost never do, because consumption always finds new ways to absorb any extra income. It's interesting to observe how this dilemma is also reflected in non-financial decisions. A consumer-minded person might spend hours on passive entertainment, like binge-watching series or scrolling through social media, while an investor-minded person uses their time to learn, improve their skills, or create projects. The consumption of time and energy, just like the consumption of money, can be an invisible trap. That's why true wealth depends not only on what we do with money, but also on what we do with our most valuable resources: time, attention, and energy. The dilemma between investment and consumption plays out every day in small decisions. Choosing to cook at home or spend money on fast food, buying clothes on impulse or saving for something more important, going into debt for an unnecessary item or setting that money aside for an emergency fund. Each of these choices seems irrelevant at the time, but accumulated, they shape a person's financial destiny. The difference between rich and poor isn't a single major decision, but rather hundreds of micro-decisions made over time. Ultimately, true economic freedom is built on understanding that consumption should serve life, not the other way around. It's not about living like an ascetic who never spends, but about spending wisely, knowing that every choice has a future price. Those who invest are building a future of options, while those who only consume are mortgaging their future for a fleeting present. The question everyone should ask themselves daily is simple yet powerful. Does this decision bring me closer to freedom or to dependence? When you truly understand and apply this question, the dilemma ceases to be confusing. It's no longer about resisting the temptation of consumption out of sacrifice, but about choosing investment as an act of self-love for the future. And when this mindset becomes a habit, the difference is no longer just financial. It's about confidence, security, and inner peace. Consumption becomes conscious enjoyment, and investment becomes the solid foundation for an abundant life. Chapter 8. The Price of Financial Ignorance. Financial illiteracy is undoubtedly one of the most costly forms of poverty. It's not measured solely by the lack of cash in your pocket, but by missed opportunities, accumulated debt, and years wasted working hard without making progress. Society taught us to read, write, memorize dates and formulas, but rarely taught us how money works in real life. And this omission is not innocent. It costs entire generations trapped in scarcity. The price of not learning about money is invisible at first, but devastating in the long run, because every financial mistake is paid for with time, effort, and frustration. Imagine someone who never understood how interest works. For that person, taking out a loan with a high interest rate doesn't seem like a big deal, because they only see the monthly payment, not the true cost over years of repayment. They take out a $1,000 loan thinking it will be easy to manage, but over time they end up paying 2 or 3 times that amount in interest. What could have been a step toward investing becomes a chain that binds them for years. And the same is true for a lack of knowledge about things like saving, investing, or taxes. Those who don't understand these rules are playing blindly on a board where others already know all the moves. Poverty is largely perpetuated by this ignorance. Parents pass on not only genes to their children, but also financial beliefs and habits. If a child grows up in a home where saving is never discussed, where the bank is seen as merely a place to go into debt, where investing is considered risking losing everything, that child enters the world with a massive deficit. It doesn't matter if they later attend university or get a good job, because their initial programming has already conditioned them. Thus, a poor family remains poor for generations, not so much because they lack opportunities, but because they don't know how to take advantage of them when they arise. A clear example of this can be seen in inheritances. A person with a scarcity mindset who receives a significant sum, instead of multiplying it, often squanders it on fleeting luxuries or impulsive decisions. Houses are sold hastily, businesses are mismanaged, money is spent on parties or trips. It all disappears in a matter of months or years. Meanwhile, another person, with financial literacy, can receive much less and turn it into lasting capital by investing in property, stocks, or their own education. The difference lies not in the amount received, but in the level of preparedness to manage it. The true cost of misinformation is seen in the small, everyday decisions we make. Those who don't understand the value of compound interest think that saving a little each month is irrelevant and put it off. Those who don't know how insurance works don't protect themselves and, when an emergency strikes, lose everything they've built. Those who can't distinguish between an asset and a liability end up spending on things that depreciate instead of income-generating assets. Each seemingly trivial decision adds up to years of extra work, sacrifice, and limitations that could have been avoided with basic knowledge. Financial illiteracy affects not only individuals but entire communities. Whole neighborhoods fall into debt traps because their residents don't know how to negotiate, don't understand contracts, or fall prey to predatory lending practices. Entire countries are held back because their populations lack the financial education to generate domestic wealth, reduce their reliance on credit, and capitalize on global market opportunities. The gap between developed and developing nations is not solely explained by natural resources or technology, but also by the level of financial literacy among their citizens. One of the most painful examples of this hidden cost is lost time. Thousands of people spend decades working from dawn till dusk, convinced that the only way to get ahead is through more physical effort, longer hours at work, and greater personal sacrifice. However, those with financial literacy know that it's not about working more, but about working smarter. Money can be multiplied through systems, investments, and businesses, but ignorance forces most people to trade hours of their lives for wages that will never be enough. And those hours are never recovered. Ignorance also fuels fear. Those who don't understand money fear it. They think investing is a dangerous game, reserved for millionaires, that saving is pointless, that managing a budget is complicated. This fear leads to paralysis, and paralysis guarantees that nothing will change. On the other hand, those who educate themselves financially discover that money is not a monster, but a tool that, when used well, provides freedom. The difference between an experienced investor and a debt-ridden worker is often not the amount of money they have, but the knowledge they possess. The cost of ignorance is also paid in emotional dependency. Many people end up trapped in toxic relationships, jobs they hate, or harmful environments simply because they lack the financial independence to make free choices. Those who don't understand how to manage money are at the mercy of abusive bosses, controlling partners, or unjust systems. Financial freedom doesn't just buy luxuries. It buys the ability to say no to what destroys your life. Ignorance, on the other hand, perpetuates invisible chains. Breaking this cycle doesn't require becoming a Wall Street expert or memorizing complicated formulas. It simply requires understanding a few basic principles: spending less than you earn, saving consistently, investing with a long-term vision, differentiating between assets and liabilities, avoiding toxic debt, protecting yourself with insurance, and learning to read contracts and opportunities as they arise. This knowledge, which should be taught in elementary school, is truly the difference between generations trapped in scarcity and generations that build abundance. The good news is that financial education is more accessible than ever. Books, audiobooks, courses, podcasts, mentors. Today there are thousands of free or affordable resources that can change the life of someone who decides to learn. However, most people continue to choose the comfort of ignorance, because learning requires humility, discipline, and action. The true cost of financial illiteracy isn't just the money lost, but the lives that could have been, the dreams sacrificed on the altar of misinformation, the talents that never flourished because someone didn't know how to manage their resources. Ultimately, poverty isn't inherited solely as a lack of money, but as a lack of financial literacy. And the most tragic aspect is that this ignorance, in the 21st century, is no longer excused. Knowledge is available to everyone, but few seek it. Thus, the price of financial illiteracy continues to be exacted by generations of people who work hard their entire lives but never experience true freedom. Chapter 9. Adopting the Investor Mindset. Adopting an investor mindset is one of the most transformative steps anyone can take in life. Because earning money, while important, is not the same as multiplying it. Millions of people around the world work hard every day, generate a steady income, and yet always end up in the same place, with little or nothing at the end of the month. Meanwhile, a much smaller group manages to make every penny that comes into their lives a silent worker that produces more wealth. That difference doesn't depend on luck or inheritance, but on the mindset with which money is approached. Most people see money as an end in itself. They work to earn it, spend it, and start all over again in an endless cycle. The investor, on the other hand, sees it as a means. For them, money is seed, initial capital, a resource that must be put to work to grow. This perspective changes everything, because it transforms money into a tool that works even while you sleep. True wealth isn't measured by how much money you can spend today, but by how many income streams you have that continue to generate returns without directly depending on your physical effort. The abundance mindset versus the scarcity mindset is another major difference. The scarcity mindset is characterized by fear. Fear of losing, fear of not having enough, fear of taking risks. This fear translates into paralysis. People with a scarcity mindset keep their money under the mattress, leave it stagnant in a bank account with no returns, or spend it quickly for fear that it will disappear. Paradoxically, this fear becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because inaction ensures that money never grows. The abundance mindset, on the other hand, is based on the confidence that there are always opportunities for growth, that mistakes are learning experiences, and that money is renewable if managed wisely. A real-world example is that of people who invest in themselves. Someone with a scarcity mindset might think that paying for a course, a book, or a mentor is spending, because they see the money going out and don't perceive an immediate return. An investor sees it as an intangible asset. The knowledge acquired can multiply their income for years. This difference in perception explains why some progress while others stagnate. The former plant seeds, the latter keeps them in a drawer until they rot. Adopting an investor mindset doesn't mean blindly jumping into risky businesses, but rather understanding that money must circulate intelligently. Every dollar can become a silent worker if placed in the right spot. A small amount of capital in an investment fund, a well-managed startup, or even a digital product can generate a steady return. The investor doesn't think in terms of immediate spending, but rather future returns. They ask themselves, what value will this decision bring me in 1 year, in 5, in 10? One of the most common myths is that you need a lot of money to start investing. This belief is one of the biggest mental blocks. The truth is that what you need isn't a large amount of money, but rather discipline and vision. Someone can start with what they have, a few dollars in an index fund, buying books that strengthen their mindset, a small investment in a digital platform, or even tools to improve their current job. The important thing is to start and, above all, to build the habit of investing systematically. Repetition, more than the amount, is what changes your destiny. The investor also understands the difference between assets and liabilities. While most people spend on things that depreciate over time, like cars, trendy clothes, or electronics, the investor seeks to acquire assets that generate cash flow, rental properties, dividend-paying stocks, businesses that produce steady income. This difference is the root of financial freedom. While one accumulates things that cost money every month, the other accumulates assets that pay them simply for existing. Another fundamental trait of an investor's mindset is patience. We live in an age of immediacy, where everything is wanted now. Quick results, instant profits, instant wealth. But real investing operates according to the laws of time. Compound interest, considered by Einstein to be the most powerful force in the universe, needs years to show its true potential. Those who invest with a short-term mindset despair at the slightest market downturn and sell at a loss. The true investor understands that wealth is a marathon, not a sprint, and that time is their greatest ally. Adopting this mindset also means accepting failure as part of the process. The fear of making mistakes keeps many people from seizing opportunities. Investors, on the other hand, know that losing is learning. Every failure teaches them what to avoid, how to improve, and where to refine their strategy. The difference is that they don't stop. They test, adjust, and continue. And in the long run, that perseverance places them at a level of experience and confidence that those who never took risks will never be able to reach. Transitioning from consumer to investor requires practical steps. The first is education, reading about personal finance, following mentors, and learning about markets, real estate, and digital businesses. The second is taking small steps, not waiting to have a lot, but starting with what you have and learning along the way. The third is discipline, making investing a habit, not an occasional activity. The fourth is vision, always thinking long-term, resisting the temptation to sacrifice tomorrow for immediate gratification. Let's take an everyday example. A person earns an extra $500 a month. With a consumer mindset, they decide to increase their spending. A more expensive car, more outings, more clothes. It all disappears in a matter of weeks, and the following month the story repeats itself. Another person, with an investor mindset, decides to allocate half of that money to an index fund and the other half to improving a skill that will increase their value in the job market. 5 years later, while the first person remains the same or is even in debt, the second has growing capital and higher income thanks to their new skill. That's the power of mindset. Ultimately, adopting an investor mindset is an act of responsibility to oneself and to future generations. It's not just about accumulating personal wealth, but about creating a legacy, breaking the cycle of scarcity that weighs down so many families and replacing it with a cycle of abundance and opportunity. Money invested wisely not only transforms the life of the person managing it, but also the lives of their children and grandchildren, because they inherit not only assets, but also principles and examples. The world is full of opportunities, but only those who think like investors are able to see them. Where others see risk, they see possibility. Where others see expense, they see a seed. Where others freeze, they act. And that difference in mindset, multiplied by years of consistent decisions, is what creates the gap between those who constantly struggle to survive and those who build a life of freedom. Money isn't about luck or magic. It's about mindset, discipline, and consistent action. Chapter 10. The New Vision of Money. From Slave to Master. For centuries, money has been a master in disguise, an invisible force that has shaped the decisions of millions without them ever pausing to reflect on it. Most live as slaves to money, working long hours, suffering constant stress, living in debt, giving up on their dreams, and sacrificing their freedom to acquire bills that vanish as quickly as they arrive. This slavery is not physical, but mental. It is the result of a limited perspective that makes money something unattainable, feared, or venerated. But when that perspective changes, when our relationship with money is transformed, money ceases to be a master and becomes a teacher. And even more, an ally in building the life we desire. Transforming our relationship with money first involves recognizing that our perception of it is inherited. From a young age, we hear phrases like, "Money doesn't grow on trees," "Money is the root of all evil," or "To earn money, you have to suffer." These ideas become ingrained in our subconscious and shape how we relate to wealth. Without realizing it, we repeat familiar patterns of scarcity, fear, and dependence. Changing this programming requires a conscious act, questioning each belief, asking ourselves if it's truly true or if it was a social lie imposed by generations who knew no other way. Only then does the door open to a new vision, in which money ceases to be an end in itself and becomes a means to achieve freedom and fulfillment. Money as an ally means seeing it as a tool that amplifies who we are. If a person is generous, with money they can be even more generous. If they are creative, they can take their ideas further. If they seek freedom, money will give them the keys to achieve it. It's not about worshiping money or putting it at the center of life, but about placing it in its proper place, as an instrument that should be at the service of our values and purposes. The mistake many make is turning it into a god that dictates all their decisions, or into a demon they fear and reject. The mature perspective is to understand that it is neutral. It has no inherent morality, it only amplifies the intentions of the human heart. To achieve this transformation, a profound shift in mindset is necessary. Instead of thinking, "I have to work to survive," start thinking, "I can make money work for me." Instead of asking, "How much does this cost?" begin asking, "How can I generate the necessary income to acquire it without compromising my freedom?" The difference may seem small, but it opens radically different paths. A dependent mindset seeks immediate security, even at the cost of one's entire life. A free mindset seeks to create systems, assets, and opportunities that ensure well-being without sacrificing what is most valuable: time and peace of mind. Financial freedom doesn't mean being a millionaire, but rather having control over your time and decisions. A person who earns little but has learned to live debt-free, with investments that cover their basic expenses, is freer than someone who earns a lot but is trapped by mortgages, loans, and commitments that force them to stay in a job they hate. The new vision of money seeks precisely that, to regain control. To understand that money shouldn't dictate our lives, but rather serve to enhance them. Changing your relationship with money also requires changing your relationship with yourself. You can't aspire to manage large sums if you lack discipline with small ones. Every senseless expense, every unnecessary debt, every excuse not to save are signs of a mind that still sees money as something external and uncontrollable. Those who learn to respect little are prepared to manage much. Abundance begins in the mind, translates into habits, and is ultimately reflected in reality. One of the biggest mistakes of modern society is associating success with consumption. Those who buy more, show more, and put on a show are seen as successful, when in reality they may be trapped in a gilded cage. The new vision of money breaks with this illusion and proposes another metric. Success is not measured by what is spent, but by what is built, not by what is flaunted, but by the freedom one has to choose. The truly wealthy person is not the one who lives in debt-ridden luxuries, but the one who can get up each day and decide how to use their time without being enslaved by money. The call to action is clear. Change your life by changing your mindset. It's not enough to complain about poverty, the economy, or the lack of opportunities. Nor is it enough to simply wish for more money. Transformation happens when you make the conscious decision to reprogram your way of thinking. Start by questioning your beliefs, then acquire financial literacy, then implement small actions that reinforce discipline, and finally build assets that give you freedom. It's a process, not an instant leap. But every step you take in that direction brings you closer to the life you dream of. Imagine for a moment what it would mean for you to live with financial freedom. Not having to wake up out of obligation, but by choice. Not working to pay off debts, but to grow and enjoy life. Not fearing every expense, but knowing that your money flows, works, and returns multiplied. This life isn't exclusive to a select few. It's possible for anyone willing to transform their perspective. The difference lies in daring to break free from the programming of slavery and embrace an owner's mindset. Society needs more people to make this change, because every individual who breaks free from their financial chains becomes an example and an inspiration to others. A parent who teaches their children to invest instead of going into debt changes the destiny of an entire family. A young person who chooses to build assets instead of chasing trends breaks the cycle of inherited poverty. A woman who takes control of her finances instead of depending on others becomes a beacon of freedom for her community. That is the true impact of this new vision of money. It not only transforms individual lives, but also generates a wave of change that can uplift entire societies. Money will continue to exist. It will continue to drive the world. It will continue to be a source of power. The question is whether it will continue to be your master or whether it will become your ally. The answer depends on you, on how you choose to think, act, and relate to it. You can continue repeating the cycle of dependence, fear, and scarcity, or you can make a conscious shift toward a life of control, abundance, and freedom. Money has no voice of its own. You are the one who assigns it the role it will play in your life. Today you face a choice: remain a slave, working to pay bills until your last day, or become a master, using money as a tool to design the life you desire. This new vision of money is not a luxury, it's a necessity. It's the path to stop merely surviving and start truly living. It's your opportunity to decide whether money will be a chain that drags you down or wings that lift you up. The decision is yours, and the time to make it is now. Conclusion: the true journey to financial freedom. True financial freedom doesn't begin with a bill in your hand or a full bank account. It begins in your mind. Everything you've heard so far, all the success and failure stories, all the lessons about fear, investing, respect, and mindset, converges on one undeniable truth. Nothing changes on the outside if it doesn't first change on the inside. That's the foundation of real wealth, a foundation that doesn't depend on governments, economic crises, salaries, or inheritances, but on the ability to train your mind to see money as an ally rather than an enemy. The journey to abundance begins the moment you realize you have the power to decide how you think and act regarding money. That instant is the true starting point because, no matter what happens around you, if your mindset is aligned with freedom, you will find the paths to achieve it. Living for money is the most common form of modern slavery. It's waking up every day with a knot in your stomach worrying about how to pay the bills, accepting a job you hate just because it provides a steady paycheck, saying no to your dreams because there's no money, postponing what's important for fear of scarcity. Millions live this life, convinced there's no other option. In this model, money controls your time, your decisions, and even your emotions. But there's another way to live, one that seems invisible to many: letting money work for you. This is the leap taken by people who understand wealth as a mental and practical construct. It doesn't mean not working. It means working intelligently, building income-generating assets, creating systems that produce beyond your physical effort. It means going from being an employee of money to being the owner of money, and that changes the entire experience of life. The great secret of those who achieve financial freedom lies not in magic formulas or strokes of luck, but in taking responsibility. Those who make excuses about the economy, lack of opportunities, the government, or luck are surrendering their power. On the other hand, those who decide to take responsibility for their relationship with money open the door to real change. It's not about denying external difficulties, but about not giving them control. Wealth begins in the mind because the mind defines how you react to those difficulties, as a victim or as a creator. That difference, though it may seem subtle, determines who remains trapped in poverty and who builds paths to freedom. Every small step you take toward that mindset is a victory. When you choose to save instead of spending on unnecessary things, you're reprogramming your mind. When you choose to invest, even a small amount, you're sending a message to your subconscious that you're capable of multiplying your wealth. When you read about financial education instead of wasting time on distractions, you're nurturing the seed of freedom. These acts, though small, are evidence that change is already happening. Wealth doesn't come from a giant leap. It comes as a sum of daily decisions that bring you closer to the life you desire. Living with financial freedom isn't an empty promise or an impossible ideal. It's an achievable reality for anyone who decides to change their perspective. No matter how limited your current situation is, what matters isn't where you come from, but where you direct your mind. Many of the people who enjoy abundance today started from nothing, some even from debt and despair. What set them apart was that one day they decided to stop being slaves to money and start making it work for them. They made decisions that at first seemed small, but which, accumulated over time, gave them control of their lives. That same possibility is open to you today. Imagine for a moment what your life would be like if you didn't have to worry about paying bills, if your time were truly yours, if your projects could be financed without depending on others. Imagine waking up every day with the certainty that money is flowing to you because you've invested it wisely. That feeling of freedom is priceless. And the most powerful thing is that it's not a fantasy. It's a path others have already traveled, and one you can walk too. The first step is mental, accepting that it's possible. The second is practical, starting with what you have, without waiting for the perfect moment, because the perfect moment never comes. Money is a reflection of your mind. If your mind dwells on scarcity, so will your wallet. If your mind dwells on abundance, with discipline and strategy, sooner or later your reality will reflect that abundance. This isn't about empty optimism. It's about understanding how beliefs shape actions and how actions build results. This chain never fails. What you believe influences what you do, and what you do determines what you have. Changing your mindset is changing the root. When the root changes, the fruit inevitably changes as well. The journey to financial freedom isn't quick or easy, but it is safe for those who persevere. There will be temptations to backslide, to spend recklessly, to give in to fear. There will be external voices trying to convince you that you're wasting your time, that money is evil, or that you can't achieve it. But always remember, those voices come from mindsets trapped in the old paradigm of enslavement. You can choose not to follow that path. You can choose to break the cycle and create a new one. That decision needs no one's approval but your own. Today you face a crucial moment. You can close this chapter and continue living as you have been, repeating patterns you already know and whose outcomes you already understand. Or you can use this moment as a turning point, a before and after in your relationship with money. Change doesn't happen with information. It happens with action. The true journey toward financial freedom begins when you decide to act today, even if it's just a small step. Every action you take will be like a stone thrown into water, creating ripples that spread far beyond your wildest dreams. Make money work for you. Make every coin that passes through your hands a silent worker that brings you closer to freedom. Make every financial decision an act of respect for your future. You don't need to wait to be rich to live with an abundance mindset. You can start right now with what you have. What matters is not the amount, but the direction. And if that direction is guided by freedom, sooner or later you will reach it. The journey is in your hands. The question is simple, yet powerful. Do you want to remain a slave to your destiny, or do you want to become the master of it? There are no in-between answers. Choose boldly, act with discipline, and trust that every step brings you closer to the life you deserve. Wealth begins in your mind, and today that mind has the opportunity to leap into a new reality. Don't put it off. The best time to start is now. So, if this audiobook inspired you and you're ready to delve deeper into your personal growth and inner transformation, I invite you to discover another eye-opening audiobook that will change the way you see the world, your decisions, and your potential. Click here, and I'll see you there.